Welcome back to Biz Talk with Sherman. I'm your host, Sherman On from Hotel Insurance Services. Really excited to be able to have our next guest on, expert Roland Parker. Welcome back, Roland, to the show.
Hey, Sherman, great to be back.
All right, so I know we've talked about some different topics when it comes to ransomware, working from home, but one of the things that I think a lot of businesses, when they get started, they have kind of an internal IT person. So kind of talk a little bit about what are some of the things that person might be doing.
So an internal IT typically happens when people have got 30 or more employees and they get an internal IT and they think, well, I'm covered, I've got internal IT. And that typically is that person's checking your backups, they're checking for general help desks, things, and making sure that you can print and scan and other things. But sometimes where they fall short is that internal IT is not looking at it from an outside point of view. Is your company secure against ransomware, cyber attacks, and that type of thing? So it does make sense when you've got an internal IT to say, okay, we need to co-manage this with an MSP company that's able to look at it from a holistic point of view. Can we secure your network, and can we make sure that your company is secure against the different types of attacks that are out there, and what to do when you're under attack? Sometimes that can be overwhelming for an internal IT, especially when you've got one IT guy and he's running between 40, 50, sometimes 120 people. Having that MSP to come in and just say, okay, we've got you secured, we're double checking things on a 24/7 basis, which obviously an internal IT is not going to be able to do that. He has to sleep, has to go on vacation. And the MSP would come in and say, we're monitoring for any changes that are happening, we're monitoring your security, and we're there as your ultimate defense.
So I have to imagine that there's a different skill set in what you just described as somebody that does the cyber security side, preventing attacks, and then there's someone and having more of a strategy versus someone that's kind of dealing with the day-to-day operations, right?
Absolutely. And most of the time, you can't really afford to have a cybersecurity specialist and have your internal IT. So that's where it makes sense to actually outsource that to somebody that does that as a professional, and it's actually not that expensive.
Now, I have to imagine when you start looking at this, there's probably not a magic number, Roland, but how does a business know when they need to bring in someone to help with this kind of more cybersecurity protection approach?
Well, there's basically 3 different stages. The people that have got less than 10 employees will quite often be, they're not going to outsource much apart from when they go down. But with cybersecurity on the increase, it then makes sense once you start getting to 10 or more employees to really have a full managed environment. And that if your MSP provider is not managing security, then you really need to add that. When you get to 40 employees, you tend to have a full-time IT guy that's on staff that can help with help desk. But that is when you really need to be co-managed. And rough pricing, co-managed can be as little as $25 to $35 per employee. Whereas when you're fully managed, you're going to be anywhere from $100 to $200 per employee, depending on the complexity of your environment.
So then you kind of see right now a lot of businesses as they grow, they start doing a kind of a combination of having maybe somebody internal and then an external partner.
And we'll even find as the companies, they may start off with a full MSP and then they migrate to having a co-managed situation as they get bigger.
And so when it comes to that cost, is there any way to kind of see that savings in a sense, or how do you know that it's being beneficial?
Well, typically if you're less than 40 employees, it really doesn't make sense to have a full-time IT person, because fully managed with cybersecurity and everything else is typically going to cost you less than employing a full-time IT person. So under 40, hands down, it makes sense to just go full MSP in combination with full MSSP, which is Managed Service Security Provider. So, and then when you get above 40, you might say, well, I really need to have somebody on staff to be coping with the day-to-day running of the things, but I want to have the security option and making sure that my IT guy is doing everything that he should be doing as well. Kind of like a double check.
That's amazing. So really, it sounds like there's a way to be able to streamline the process on the front end that I don't think, okay, I need to go hire somebody if I am at 30 employees, and then that person probably isn't going to be busy enough, right, with some of the day in, day out things that are going to be required, right?
And in addition to that, you're paying all that money, but you're not getting the cybersecurity tools that come with the MSP. So realistically, not only is it going to cost you more, but you're actually getting less out of it. Also, with an MSP that provides 24/7 support like Impress does, you're actually being monitored and protected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no ways you can get that out of a full-time employee, not unless you're thinking that he's actually going to be working 24/7. But it definitely gives you an advantage. Now, one of the big things that we find is that companies say to us, well, we're smaller, we don't want to be fully managed, we're only going to call you when we have an issue. The problem with that is that you're not fully protected. So when you go down, you could be hit with a ransomware attack only to discover your backups weren't working, your employees are shut down during that period of time, and I mean, that could completely shut your company down. So you could be thinking, well, I'm not going to commit to a monthly amount, but actually it could cost you a heck of a lot more in the long run. Whereas if you say, well, I'm going to pay a monthly amount, you know what your fixed costs are, but in addition to that, you've got the peace of mind knowing that you're fully protected, and if anything does happen, you've got the backups and security of a qualified MSP IT a bunch of guys behind you that are going to get you up and running quickly. Otherwise, your IT guy is coming in blind. He's relying on you to actually be checking your backups, checking security. The chances are you're not actually going to be doing that.
That sounds like that old adage where you're being penny wise but pound foolish.
Correct.
Well, thanks again, Roland, for coming in. If people have any follow-up questions, how can they get in touch with you and your team over there at Impress? The
best thing to do, give us a call, 281-647-9977, or reach us on the web, www.computers.tech, T-E-C-H.
All right, thanks again, Roland, for coming on the show. We're going to take a quick commercial break and come right back.
Thanks, Sherman.